Even as Trump benefits from the very electoral vote certification that he tried to deny the Democrats 4 years ago, still he continues to put on full display just how unqualified he is for the job he's about to take by yet again driving a wedge between us and our closest allies. He just posted on Truth Social, "Many people in Canada love being the 51st state. The United States can no longer suffer the massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. If Canada merged with the US, there would be no tariffs, taxes would go way down, and they would be totally secure from the threat of the Russian and Chinese chips that are constantly surrounding them. Together, what a great nation it would be." And of course, this is a recurring theme with Trump, wherein he expends all of his political capital attacking the countries closest to us, while also falling over himself to defend, compliment, and protect the world's autocrats, dictators, and strongmen. Why? Because he doesn't care about democracy, and he is giddy at the prospect of turning the United States into the very brand of illiberal democracy that his buddies in the autocrat club have done to their own countries. You can learn a lot about Trump by who he attacks, and even more about him by who he doesn't. He also put on full display the extent to which he has a fundamental misunderstanding of tariffs and trade deficits. First of all, having a trade deficit isn't inherently good or bad. It just means that there was a difference in imports versus exports. U.S. goods and services trades with Canada totaled an estimated $909 billion in 2022. Exports were $427 billion. Imports were $481 billion. The U.S. goods and services trades deficit with Canada was $53.5 billion in 2022. Again, that's not good or bad. We're certainly not suffering, as Trump puts it. It just means that we import a bit more than we export. We need more of what they're selling than they need of what we're selling, which isn't crazy, by the way. Our population is almost 10 times the size of Canada's, which only has about 40 million citizens. We've got 350 million. If anything, a $50 billion trade deficit given that disparity is shockingly low. But there's no rule, economic or otherwise, that there can be no trade deficit. It's just a matter of what one country needs versus what they don't. Trump thinking this is an example of us suffering goes to show that he either doesn't understand how trade deficits work, or he does, he's just content to lie to people about it. Now, as far as tariffs are concerned, he is still waving this threat around while refusing to acknowledge the simple reality that if he imposes tariffs on Canadian goods, those tariffs will not be paid by Canada, they will be paid by the importing companies in America. And those increased costs on those companies will be passed on to not Canada, but Americans who buy goods here. That is how tariffs work. That's how they've always worked. Tariffs on Canada are a tax on Americans. So not only will we pay more, but Canada will then reciprocate with their own tariffs, which means a trade war will begin and even more goods in the United States will be taxed. I don't know how to say this any more clearly. There are no winners in a trade war. And yet, even though it's clear that Trump's actions are going to cost Americans more money, and even though it's clear that there is no winner in a trade war, and even though it's clear that Canada will likely impose retaliatory tariffs, meaning costs will surge on even more goods, still Trump will never reverse course because he is not interested in doing what's best for Americans, he's interested in protecting his ego. And because he's already publicly called for tariffs once, he views any withdrawal of that position as a capitulation, and he couldn't possibly have that. He couldn't possibly bear to look weak in front of the world, and so even though launching a trade war is a terrible idea with no winners that will only usher in higher prices for everyone, Americans included, still he'll persevere because he's got an ego to protect. Lest there be any doubt, Trump's presidency isn't about us, it's about him. And consider the most egregious part. These high prices come in stark contrast to his rhetoric before the election, when he railed against the Democrats for ushering in high prices. Now, in reality, we know that those high prices were the result of worldwide inflation. Inflation that was so damaging and pervasive that there were hardly any incumbent parties in the world that didn't lose seats or lose power altogether. Trump capitalized off of that, and he even acknowledged as much, that the high prices that came about as the result of inflation were why he won this election.
I won on two things, the border, and more than immigration. You know, they like to say immigration. I break it down more to the border, but I won on the border, and I won on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, you know, who uses the word? I started using the word. The groceries, when you buy apples, when you buy bacon, when you buy eggs, they would double and triple the price over a short period of time. And I won an election based on that. We're going to bring those prices way down.
And so the fact that he knew those high prices were why he won, and yet he is now making the conscious decision to usher in high prices again, is all the more egregious. It shows that he knew he benefited from Americans' pain, but rather than seek to assuage that pain, to mitigate that pain, to lower that pain, he is perfectly content to exacerbate it now that he doesn't need anybody's votes anymore. That right there is moral bankruptcy at its highest order. And look, in terms of whether Trump goes through with this, well, I certainly hope that he doesn't, there's very little reason to believe that he won't. In the same way that he's not backing down now because he can't handle the hit to his ego by admitting fault or admitting that he was wrong, it's not like his skin is going to be any thicker in 2 weeks when he takes office. And let's not forget either that he has done this before. Here's Tennessee's Department of Agriculture Commissioner back in 2019 discussing the impacts of the trade war on farmers and the Trump administration being forced to make those farmers whole by using our tax dollars to compensate for him starting a trade war.
60% of our exports were going to China. Trade wars started that effectively lost soybean, corn, took a big hit. I mean, it really, and all farmers in the whole country were affected, and especially those that grow a lot of row crops in West Tennessee. At least some reports that they're making progress with China now. Even if that progress is made and you reinstitute that market, it's going to take some time to get it back developed. Some people say a year or two even after that.
So you think the subsidies that they get, they'll hold out, probably won't go bankrupt, anything like that?
Well, the money that they get's not going to fill the hole completely. We need some movement on and try to reopen that market before we'll be fully whole.
All of which is to say, for the umpteenth time, that trade wars have no winners. There is a reason that diplomacy is a better tool than entering office like an unhinged toddler and waging economic war on your allies. Remember, these aren't even our enemies, they are our allies. Trump can parrot America first until he's blue in the face, but we live in a global economy, we rely on other countries to keep our economy running, and we are better off cooperating with them than we are declaring war on them. And that should be a basic concept that even a child could understand, and yet the fact that Trump doesn't really does tell you everything you need to know. And finally, it's of course clear that Trump is gaining zero friends by demeaning our closest ally, Canada, by relegating that sovereign country to some mere offshoot of the United States. Here's the leader of Canada's Conservative Party, not the Liberals, but the Conservatives, duly shutting down Trump's nonsense about Canada becoming the 51st state.
I have the strength and the smarts to stand up for this country. And my message to incoming President Trump is that first and foremost, Canada will never be the 51st state of the U.S.
If that's how even the conservatives are responding to Trump, then that should make it abundantly clear just how warm they are to the idea of acquiescing to his demands. The fact is that Trump has the diplomatic touch of a bull in a china shop. He might think that he's showing the world strength by threatening to annex Canada and Greenland and Panama, but in actuality, he's just doing Putin's bidding by pushing the U.S. farther away from its allies in NATO and giving Russia and China exactly what they want in a weakened West. If you can explain to me how that's America first, I'm all ears. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see more of my content, which is always free of advertising, sponsorships, and paywalls, please make sure to subscribe to this channel using the subscribe button right here on the screen. And if you'd like to support my work even further, you can grab a copy of my instant #1 New York Times selling book, Shameless, available for sale right now. That link is also on the screen. Thanks so much for watching.